continue with our discussion of technology and Shabbat this week. Next week, we will proceed technology and ethics. So if an ethical question comes up, please put it on hold till next week. So in 1948, while the national leaders of Israel were preparing for its establishment, Chief Rabbi Herzog took initiative and set up a committee to deal with topical problems as they related to public services on Shabbat. Areas of concern were: one, government services, administration, police, mail, post, and ports. The second area of concern were public utilities, water, electricity. Third, defense. And fourth, industry, oil, refineries, cement, glass. And interestingly, the kibbutzim, the founders of the religious kibbutzim, undertook the challenge of finding a way to operate the kibbutz in a way that was halachically permissible. For example, they had to come up with ways of milking cows and watering the fields on Shabbat. In other countries, Jews were able to arrange for non-Jews to do things like turning lights on and off. And you could not keep the cows from being milked because we have another value that's very, very important, tsa'ar ba'alei chayim. You don't want an animal suffering with pain. Mm-hmm. But they get to Israel, and the religious chalutzim pioneers were committed to finding a way to do what was necessary themselves, what was called avodah ivrit, and trying to stay away from using Arab labor, foreign labor, while keeping Shabbat. Well, unlikely that Rav Herzog and his committee envisioned today's topical issues, both in public and individual personal settings. They couldn't foresee the automated milking that now exists. Could they have begun to imagine a space shuttle and an Israeli astronaut, and Ilan Ramon, Zichrono Livracha, in 2003, asking for halachic guidance on how to observe Shabbat in orbit? And by the way, a Rav Halpern ruled that any would-be space traveler should fix the time of blast off and calculate the day and hour of Shabbat from then on. Now, not every issue is as romantic and heavenly, as that. There are many more mundane issues that our people has dealt with and continues to deal with in these times, both in Israel and in the diaspora. In talking with Beth Tikvah's communications and marketing head, Daniel Nurgitz, who we can see in front of us, he let me know that he has been involved with some of these issues. And so we have a guest for about 5-6 minutes to speak to some of these issues. Daniel, please.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. So I worked for a Toronto-based company called Kosher Innovations, and it was founded by Rabbi Shmuel Veffer, who was very much part of the Isha Torah movements, which helps. There's a lot of focus on Baalei Tshuva, people becoming more observant. So he is a very inventive person, and he came up with some ideas that he thought would be of interest to the observant Jewish market. So one of the most famous ones that they've come up with is called the kosher lamp. And I'll show you an example of it. I have a model called the travel kosher lamp. And basically it just looks like a little cylinder. It's a very simple device that allows you to adjust the light on Shabbat without turning it on or off. So I've already turned it on. You can't see it because it's dark, but if I lift the cover, you can get lots of light or a little light or no light. And this just rotates so that it stays up. And you can use this on Shabbat because I'm not actually turning on and off the light, I'm just hiding it or I'm just revealing it. Mm-hmm. So this is a really, really handy thing if you want to read in bed or if you want to see in the room, but you're going to use the same room later to sleep in and you want it dark. It's a really great way to customize the amount of light you want. And there's a whole bunch of different models. And what's really neat about this is that it's been accepted and desired by a lot of the observant market, not only in Canada, but the United States and Israel, South Africa, Australia, Europe, all over the place. And the whole point of Kosher Innovations was to come up with practical and innovative products for Jewish observance, and it's meant to enhance Shabbat. It's not meant to fix a problem, it's meant to enhance it. Now, Kosher Innovations came up with other products, and some of them people laugh at. They might be a little bit more far-fetched. There's the Shabbos bathroom tissue, because on Shabbat there, and I'm sure Bracha might touch on this, there are 39 malachot or what's it called, areas of work, and you can define work in different ways that you're not supposed to do on Shabbat. And so you're not supposed to tear. So normally when you have toilet paper, you tear the perforation, and you're not supposed to do that. So Shabbos bathroom tissue is like facial tissue. It pulls from a box, but instead of clogging your toilet with facial tissue, it's bathroom tissue, which is meant for the toilet. So you would think, that sounds really outlandish, but it, for people who, do not want to tear, it's a great product. There's also other products like the kosher clock, which has an alarm that shuts off after a minute, so you don't have to press a button. And it's great for setting times for various, you want to wake up in the morning for Shabbat morning, you want to have a nap and wake up again for Mincha and Mariv, you can do that. There is the Shabbos toothbrush and Shabbos toothwash. And now this is another one where you think it's a little bit outlandish. It's rubber nubs and a liquid, because you're not supposed to spread a paste like toothpaste, and you're not supposed to make your gums bleed. So it's soft, doesn't do a great job at cleaning your mouth, it freshens your breath a little bit, but it's better than nothing, or I don't know, using your finger with like mouthwash or something like that. There's a whole bunch of products where you have to wonder, are they crossing the line a little bit? Like, is this taking it a bit too far? There's a lot of very specific rules about what you can do and what you can't do on Shabbat. And so are these like in the spirit of Shabbat? Is this a workaround for something that, you would enjoy the rest of the week, but on Shabbat you shouldn't enjoy it, but Shabbat's supposed to be a time for enjoying and relaxing and resting. So these are some of the questions that come up. Also, I should say that Kosher Innovations always consults with poskim, the rabbis and halachic leaders that check to make sure that each product is done in accordance with halacha. So it's sort of where engineering and innovation meet halacha, and it's a really fascinating process to try to build something that is not only doable, marketable, cost effective, but also it meets the strict standards of halacha. So I had the opportunity to help with some product development, and it's a really amazing, sort of niche place to be. So I guess that's what I'll tell you about that.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
My pleasure.
Anybody want, I don't want to put Daniel on the spot, but you just heard, and he in fact said some of these things are going to sound wild or outlandish. Would anybody respectfully like to say how you felt when you're listening to this serious young man describing these realities? Anyone?
Well, to me, it's b'chayitem ba. We have to adjust to the times.
Okay, all right. So looking at it very positively. Thank you, Esther. Anybody else?
I think it's Stan.
Dan.
I appreciate the fact that observance Jews want to be observant on Shabbat. And I think that this can tend to dilute or get around the intention to some extent. Do you understand? I'm trying to express this in a way that, in other words, is it a sincere, is it really a sincere observance as opposed to trying to modify it so that it conforms to modernity?
Okay, that is a critical question. And you did that very politely, I think, Daniel.
Yes.
Because that's what I was looking for, someone to raise the possibility. Are these not circumventions? Are they not looking for a loophole? And I'm sure there are those yes and those no, but I really believe, I would like to believe, maybe naively, that there's got to be a balance of wanting to go with the times.
I'm listening to Bracha.
But also not wanting to forget about Shabbat. You know, just as the people that I talked about in the religious kibbutzim, maybe it would have been pikuach nefesh, saving the life of the cows, and so they could have just milked, but no, they wanted to be able to do both. Have to take care of animals on their own because we're in our stubborn state. On the other hand, keep in mind that it is Shabbat.
Well, Bracha, in the Orthodox Synagogue in Boca, in Florida, they have a Shabbat elevator.
Just a minute, we'll just.
Okay, somebody needs to mute themselves, please. I'm sorry, they have?
A Shabbat elevator.
Well, Shabbat elevators are very popular, and there are specific rules about what really qualifies as a legal Shabbat elevator. Absolutely, there are. So what I'd like to do today is, somebody please mute yourself. I'm not sure who it is. What I'd like to do today is look at a few specific examples of technological devices and their use on Shabbat. And by the way, rarely is there one set ruling, even within the Orthodox community. What is significant is the reasoning behind permitting or prohibiting the use of a particular device. And what I find fascinating, what are the values and the motives behind the varied halachic rulings? Is it to let everyone and everything rest, as we say in Kiddush, you know, let your servants and your animals and your family, everyone should rest? Is it wanting to encourage a break from the rat race of the weekday? Is it to focus on family and friend time face to face? Is it acknowledging as empowered human beings that we are not always in control, and therefore we don't create, as Daniel alluded to, the types of work that we're not meant to do? It's not that it's heavy work, it's that we're not meant to create or destroy or to make a physical change. We're not going to go into the details. But so
But Bracha,
we want to say that we're not always in control 6 days a week, and that's a mitzvah that we create and do. And that's as much of a mitzvah as on the seventh day, resting and acknowledging for 25 hours that we're not in control, but God is. There's also a concern for human dignity, and we will touch on that. And there are even diverse views as to the best way to attain spirituality on Shabbat is through some of these devices. Now, we're going to begin with some thoughts about Shabbat from three known to us thinkers. Avram Yoshua Heschel, representing the conservative movement, Mordechai Kaplan, Reconstructionist, and Soloveitchik from the Orthodox. So let's keep their thoughts in mind when we then look at the different devices. Heschel says the following: he who wants to enter the holiness of the day must first lay down the profanity of clattering commerce, of being yoked to toil. He must go away from the screech of dissonant days, from the nervousness and fury of acquisitiveness and the betrayal in embezzling his own life. He must say farewell to manual labor and learn to understand that the world has already been created and will survive without the help of man. 6 days a week, we wrestle with the Lord, with the world, wringing profit from the earth. On the Shabbat, we especially care for the seed of eternity planted in the soul. The world has our hands, but our soul belongs to someone else. 6 days a week, we seek to dominate the world. On the seventh day, we try to dominate the self. Mordechai Kaplan. In pursuit of other aims, we frequently become so absorbed in the means as to lose sight of the goal. Here, the Shabbat comes to our aid. An artist cannot be continually wielding his brush. He must stop at times in his painting to freshen his vision of the object, the meaning of which he wishes to express on his canvas. Living is also an art, says Kaplan. We dare not become absorbed in its technical processes and lose our consciousness of its general plan. The Shabbat represents those moments when we pause in our brushwork to renew our vision of the object. Having done so, we take ourselves to our painting with clarified vision and renewed energy. And lastly, Soloveitchik, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with this, talks about, in the beginning of Breshit, Genesis, two types of Adam. Adam 1, dignity was equated by the psalmist with man's capability of dominating his environment and exercising control over it. Man acquires dignity through glory, through his majestic posture vis-a-vis his environment. This dignity cannot be realized as long as he has not gained mastery over his environment. It is through rational, logical, and mathematical operations that this mastery begins to unfold. Man of old, who could not fight disease and succumbed in multitudes to yellow fever or any other plague with degrading helplessness, could not lay claim to dignity. Only the man who builds hospitals, discovers therapeutic techniques, and saves lives is blessed with dignity. To conquer space, he boards a plane at the New York airport at midnight and takes several hours later a leisurely walk along the streets of London. Man of the 17th and 18th centuries, who needed several days to travel from Boston to New York, was less dignified than a man whose mastery has made it possible for him to act in accordance with his responsibility. The biblical promise of being creatures b'tselem Elohim, made in the image of God. And the second Adam is different. He looks for the image of God, not in the mathematical formula or the natural relational law, but in every beam of light, in every bud and blossom, in the morning breeze and the stillness of a starlit evening. In a word, Adam II explores not the scientific abstract universe, but the irresistibly fascinating qualitative world where he establishes an intimate relation with God. Now, I want to ask you, which of the three thinkers reflects the most positive appreciation of the role of technology in our lives? And if you prefer, which has the most negative view? Anyone? Take a moment to reread if you need be. I'll give you, Mordecai Kaplan is kind of in the middle, very pragmatic. So of Soloveitchik and Heschel, who was more for technology than the other?
Not Soloveitchik.
Absolutely Soloveitchik. Absolutely. And it might sound surprising, but when he talks about the need for one to feel dignity, and it doesn't have to be just the examples that he gives, anyone who does something, he talks a great deal about science, but there are many areas in which we master and we help this world.
Oh, yes, I see it now.
Okay, now,
Bracha,
Marlene.
I think that Heschel is actually more realistic than Soloveitchik.
Okay, go ahead.
Heschel realizes that we are going to go through the week and we are going to be involved in all of these tasks, if you want to call them mundane tasks, although a lot of what he's talking about is not mundane. But
Yes.
he realizes that we have a need to step back on Shabbat and to really glimpse the world from another place, but we're the same person. Whereas with Soloveitchik, with Adam 1 and Adam 2, he really splits man into a bipolar personality almost. One who is completely absorbed in the day-to-day, the other one who leads the spiritual life and really would have to work hard to become part of the day-to-day world.
Thank you. Based on what I presented here, you would definitely have the images of what you've just described. So in the future, I will bring other texts from Soloveitchik, who himself was an observant man and reached spirituality together with. But yeah, absolutely. It sounds like that. Now, and that's a dichotomy that's hard to grasp. You know, does that really mean that during the week, that same technology person isn't davening 3 times a day? I don't think so. I don't think so. Okay,
But
now,
the technology does make it possible for us to observe the Shabbat, like
okay,
like the automatic lights, you know?
yes. And Esther, we're going to get to that. I'd like to follow a train of thought here, if you will. So I'd like you to become aware, and I think it's so interesting that we're going to read some of the details. And this is really going to sound wild. But this is from a research paper done in 2007 by 3 women, not observant. And so they felt that they were totally objective. And they describe some homes of actually 20 American Orthodox families. And I'm just giving you a bit, and I'm bringing it because it's wild, but also they suggest that these families do not see it as looking for loopholes at all, but actually the automation that Esther just mentioned can actually contribute to the goals of Shabbat. So I'm going to read this quickly, describing the systems in these homes. Several of the homes used X10, a system for using household wiring to send digital data between devices. X10 users would set up a schedule on a computer, which would then send commands to various X10 controllers throughout the home to turn devices on and off.
Mhm.
X10 users tended to develop fairly complex lighting schedules that covered more areas in the home than timers. And X10 was used to control a wide range of devices, from lights to towel warmers to skylights. And we'll get back to that. There was also what's known as right schedule. Several of the homes we visited used a high-end system developed specifically for the Orthodox Jewish community. The system includes a rule-based program that uses the Jewish calendar and the family's specified preferences to dynamically generate a schedule that interfaces with controllers, typically X10, installed by the system developer, as well as with other automation systems in the home, such as lighting, sprinkler, security, entertainment, and security systems. Right schedule knows the Jewish calendar for the next several decades and takes into account the varying requirements for different holidays. For example, the dairy oven may be turned on by the automation system only once a year for the Shavuot holiday. Right schedule, get ready, is an expensive system costing tens of thousands of dollars or more. The system is targeted at the control of numerous devices in large luxury homes. For example, you sitting down? One such home that we visited had 11 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms. On a 3-day holiday, approximately 5,500 on-off signals are sent to the 175 devices in this home, including not only myriad lights and kitchen appliances, but also more exotic items such as an elevator, a large bank of drapes, and a roof that slides back to create the religiously required open-air booth during the annual Sukkot holiday. In many homes, Right Schedule also blinks the lights to provide reminders, for example, that services at the nearby synagogue are about to begin. Now, can you see, and I'm really not making fun of this, those who are doing it for the right reasons should be blessed. Can you see the automation in these homes as contributing to the goals of Shabbat, in particular, increasing the spiritual experience?
Definitely.
Anyone?
Yes, I do.
Okay, they reported the families 3 ways. Say one that you're thinking.
Well, I was thinking at home, the Shabbat, we had the lights on and off, so the Shabbat can be prolonged in light, not in darkness.
Okay, anyone else? Well, they said when you give somebody,
Yeah,
Go on.
I think this is crazy, to be honest with you. It's like having a technological Shabbos goy. And I mean, there is so much added into this right system that doesn't have to be there to enjoy Shabbat and to participate in it properly. And it's just, to me, it's beyond comprehension that anybody would spend that kind of money just to do that in their home.
okay. Does anybody want to come out in support? I see a hand has been raised. Shari.
Yeah, I don't think I'm supporting it. I'm thinking that, you know, other than a day of rest, Shabbat's supposed to feel different. So if everything's automatized to make it feel like any other day, I think it's defeating the purpose. I think it's better to have the low cost items like that Daniel showed, the light, because even if
We
you
live in different worlds, Daniel and me. Okay, go
yeah,
on.
but even if you have that little lower cost contraption to, you know, adjust the level of the light, at least it still feels different than if everything's automated to be like any other day.
Okay, we hear Marlene and Shari. I do want to offer, and we're just touching on these issues, that they claim that by not having to worry about these mundane responsibilities, it freed up their minds to be reflective, which is certainly one of Shabbat's goals. They also said that it enhanced the Shabbat experience, adding to the ambiance, because they could pre-program prettier lights and running water in a fountain, just as we pre-cook a very festive Shabbat meal. And thirdly, they felt because it's automated, that symbolizes their inability to take control, which we said is one of the goals of Shabbat, that we acknowledge that we are not in control. But God is. So just gave you everything but the kitchen sink.
Thinking the pre-programming involves a great deal of control.
But not on Shabbat.
Not on Shabbat. They do all the pre-program before Shabbat so that it can all be automated.
That's right.
And the probability is that they didn't do that themselves.
But it also preempts the desire to do their own thing. the temptation to do the wrong thing, because I could see somebody who's on the borderline, and he wants the light. Should I, shouldn't I? If the light comes on automatically, he doesn't have to be tempted to put it on.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Yes, because they don't have control. Okay, which in other devices, we'll see one in particular that even if it's halachically okay, there might be a temptation to go beyond. We'll get to that. Okay, so let's begin. Yes.
I was going to say, I think the objection and what people are saying is a point that somebody brought up. I could see, like, we use timers for lights and things like that. It's the extraneous things. And even your example, like having a fountain come on to make it more beautiful, it seems to me that's not appropriate. But I can certainly understand wanting your stove turned on, the lighting off and on. If you're that wealthy, you probably need a security system. So parts of it to me are perfectly acceptable. But parts of it, I really agree, probably violate the spirit of Shabbat.
Okay. I'm wondering if I didn't do them a service by giving you these details and the prices. That's very interesting. Okay.
But what about mind, like the security? If you have peace of mind that it's secure and you don't have to worry about it on Shabbat, isn't that an advantage?
Sure it is. Of course. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about a few other devices. And first of all, the smartphone. So I want you to look here at this list and in your head, rate potential uses of a smartphone on Shabbat from what you think. If you were concerned about halacha, what should be the most permissible to the least permissible? So, finding relevant resources related to debates that occurred during a Torah study session. Completing an urgent piece of business not completed during the week. Calling 911 when a congregant has a heart attack. Notice it doesn't say when a rabbi or a chazan has a heart attack. I'm sorry. Okay. Somebody had to get that. Placing a bet on the Sunday's football game. Watching a Jewish movie. Making sure that a play date for a child is still on later that afternoon. Playing a most amazing new tune of the Maccabees for Chanukah. And lastly, responding to a text from a long estranged relative. So.
Only 911.
Okay, does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
I don't
Absolutely.
necessarily agree.
Okay, Brenda?
I would think that perhaps responding to the text from a long exchange relative would be something that would be more permissible than most of the other. Calling 911 for sure, but I wonder about that because I think that's really important. And if you didn't respond, maybe that reaching out, that was it. And then if you waited a day or two, you'd lose that connection. So I think that's important.
I think Brenda's thinking correctly here in that, first of all, and we're talking about a smartphone that has been created in justice to be used on Shabbat. So even if you don't have that kind of a phone, if you've got somebody there that needs to get to a doctor or a hospital, you're not going to be concerned about that because it's pikuach nefesh, saving a life. So what Brenda has done is take us to the next one. And there is, every word here is intentional. A long estranged relative. And if you don't call right back and something happens to that person the next day, what's going to be? Very interesting. Anybody else? What can happen though, is that what happens, and somebody referred to this, that I think Brenda actually, that once you do something with that smartphone, it could be tempting to use it for something else, even somebody who is committed halachically, and some people won't trust themselves. I'm always fascinated, this is just entering my head. Once I worked with a principal who shomer Shabbat, but he smoked, I don't know, 90 cigarettes a day. And he'd go outside the school when he did that, but you can be sure, as soon as it was Shabbat, he stopped for 25 hours. And that's an amazing thing, how that was what got him to stop. Margot.
Yeah, just by coincidence, this morning I read an online piece from the Guardian newspaper in England
Yes.
about a current fight, shall I say, I don't quite know the language, over kosher cell phones in the Haredi community. Do you know about
yes.
that?
Oh, for sure.
And
I don't think fight is a strong enough word.
Oh, okay. I was trying to be a little polite.
Yes.
But this is not strictly Shabbat because it's all the
No,
time.
this is during the week,
Yeah.
the kosher
And
phones.
what I gather is that the restrictions that were put on the kind of cell phone and the programming that was in it and so on had to be increasingly relaxed because of things like having to pay your taxes or do other things online. And there is even a suggestion that the committee that's in charge on giving out the kosher certificates for these phones is itself not that kosher and is making money by being very picky and choosy and restrictive.
Well, there's a shocker.
Yes. So I just wanted to put that in the conversation.
Sure, Margot, this is
Personally,
yeah.
That because I hadn't heard of this before. I read this article that there was such a thing as kosher and non-kosher smartphones.
What, just to say a couple of things about it, you can drive, and just by coincidence, was it yesterday or the day before, I drove through Geula, a very frum neighborhood, and there were people, and this isn't the first time I've seen it, standing with signs in Hebrew talking about the damage that internet, and I forget the other word that was there, cause, and protesting it. But I do know a former student of mine has a brother who lives in Beitar Elite outside of Jerusalem with two tiny children, and they are definitely black hats. And when her nephew was, I think, 3 months old, and she was holding on to the baby, and she took out, because he was sleeping, her cell phone, her brother practically jumped on her saying, no, you can't do that, as if the baby was going to see something. So on the one hand, they are protecting themselves from what they find to be profane, and what they see as profane isn't necessarily. On the other hand, there are things that are on our cell phones that are definitely profane. And then the other issue is that they found when COVID started here, that many of the frum communities and Arab communities, because they didn't have these connections with their phones, etc., they were not aware of certain things, were not following certain rules, and that is not a very good situation. So it is definitely a topic that is discussed
By the way,
continuously.
many Haredi homes forbid TV.
Yes, yeah. And there are many non-Haredi that don't have TV for other reasons, feeling that there's garbage. But there is a lot of good on TV as well. Okay, we're going to move on, just getting a taste, to hearing aids and electric wheelchairs. And I mentioned before the concern for human dignity. And there is an institution, a few in Israel, that totally focus on technology and these specific devices, and knowing that there are communities here that will only use the devices if they are considered halachic. And that's the way I think it should be seen, not that they're looking for loopholes. So what they say about this is called the Tzomet Institute. The preservation of human dignity is considered of such a high priority that the Tosafot declare, and if the sole pain experienced in one's shame to mingle with others, there is no greater pain. This is specifically significant for those who suffer from any type of physical handicap that is readily noticeable. Great strides from any type of physical handicap that is readily noticeable. Great strides have been made in modern technology, ranging from prostheses and transplants to hearing aids and cochlear implants, which not only help the well-being and day-to-day functioning of the handicapped individual, but also enable him to take his or her place in society free of any embarrassment. Today, through modern technology and advanced therapy, hearing impaired children are mainstreamed in regular yeshivot and schools. They can hear and speak quite normally and do not learn sign language. However, to function normally, they are dependent on the use of their hearing aids. Being deprived of their use is akin to being condemned to a world of total silence. This in turn has a major effect on their functioning in society. Now, the wheelchair permits a high degree of mobility for wheelchair-bound invalids who cannot operate a regular wheelchair, both in the house and outside. The invalid is able to feel independent and self-sufficient, which is extremely important for his or her self-esteem. Now, this is quite a story. One time, Rabbi Neuwirth was asked by a man in London, where The Guardian comes from, who needed a wheelchair for his 15-year-old daughter. Should I use the Tzomet system on Shabbat or push her by hand? The father added that he was strong and would have no problem at all pushing his daughter if necessary. Rabbi Neuwirth replied, "This system is definitely permitted, and there is no reason for you to strain yourself. Even if you want to make the effort, your daughter will feel more comfortable if she can maintain her independence. This is also a consideration that must be taken into account by the Halacha," which takes us back to us saying Halacha has to see the bigger picture. Now, the Kindle, an e-reader. Rabbi Danny Nevins, who reasons that the use of electricity from the conservative movement on Shabbat is not inherently forbidden, as the circuitry connection is neither creating a fire nor building something new. Nevertheless, regards many types of electrical and electronic appliances as violating either the formal or the informal goals of Shabbat. He says, e-readers like the Kindle are problematic both in that they create a durable image and encourage readers to go online to shop for additional content. You know, that's what I was suggesting before. It is conceivable that future versions may work better with Shabbat values, but the iPad demonstrates that a tendency toward multifunctionality, indicating continued challenges for Shabbat use. In the Atlantic article, he also explains this theory that using an e-reader may violate the Shabbat laws of tchum, or boundaries. What is this notion? The Torah says you shouldn't leave your place on the seventh day. You only walk a certain distance. You can say Judaism is creating a local ideal that you experience Shabbat in a place with people live and don't go out of those boundaries. The problem with virtual experiences is they distract our attention from our local environment and break all boundaries of space and time. Shabbat is about reinforcing boundaries of space and time so we can have a specific experience. Now, somebody responds to this concept of tchum and says, I can understand ruling that reading an ebook on a Kindle, Nook, Sony Reader, iPad, etc., is a forbidden act on Shabbat because it is not within the spirit of Shabbat. That is to say that things not in keeping with the spirit of the Shabbat day can pull us out of that state and back to the realities of the weekday. However, I don't agree with the rationale that it shouldn't be allowed based on the principle that we shouldn't leave our place on Shabbat. Any good book, whether read from traditional paper or on a tech gadget, has the potential to, now you fill in the blank. And I think this is incredible. You know, it's not in the spirit of Shabbat, he accepts that. This is a Rabbi Zahavi. On the other hand, he says this issue of going out of your particular space, that does not fit in. We all know that books we read, and they are meant to what?
Take us out of our space to
Exactly.
adventure or whatever.
They transcend us, breaking the boundaries of space and time. He says, even a good story tale that I tell my children at bedtime on a Friday night can be a virtual experience that magically takes them away from the boundaries of space and time. And that's with the book you're holding in your hand. In fact, on Shabbat, we are even supposed to be virtually transported to get a taste of the world to come, Olam Haba, through our prayer and our Torah study experiences. Again, different rabbis and some from within the same movement see these devices and yes or no in very different ways.
Okay.
So you have to know whom you're going to ask.
I
Yes.
have a question for you. So I had a friend who belonged to the same conservative synagogue I did in Florida. And she would not take a lift for me because I do drive on Shabbat home, but she would take a bus because the driver was not Jewish. Do you see the logic? I couldn't comprehend it.
Well, that falls in line with people feeling if the driver is not Jewish, he is not commanded to keep Shabbat. But in fact, we are going to talk about that. As I'm looking at our time, we were going to begin our next major topic is autonomous or automated cars on Shabbat. And perhaps it's good that we're going to keep that till next week, because many of the ethical issues that we're going to talk about stem from the use of the autonomous car and not on Shabbat. What I will share with you is the following. Okay, I'm going to skip down. Google to launch world's first driverless Shabbat car. This is going back to 2016. The world's first Shabbat car using Google technology will hit the roads later this year. Google's California headquarters announced on Thursday it will partner with Israeli firm Chauffeur Shabbat to develop a driverless car that can be pre-programmed to various destinations and requires no human intervention for the duration of the Jewish Sabbath, which begins at sundown on Friday and lasts until sundown on Saturday. Much like a Shabbat elevator, the car operates automatically and will not need to be switched on or off, a feature that will appeal to more observant Jews who abstain from operating electrical switches on the Sabbath. The engine can remain on for 25 hours. That's the way it's built. But a special hibernation mode developed by the Israeli firm ensures it can run at the lowest possible levels and uses only a tiny percentage of the vehicle's stored fuel. In winter months, the car's external lights can also be programmed to automatically turn on, much like time switches used by observant Jews in their homes. Other features include doors that can be opened with the traditional key rather than the electronic fob and automatic climate control. A luxury version of the car even has a hot plate fitted into the glove compartment, which can be used to keep chicken soup and kugel warm while traveling to a destination for Friday night dinner or Saturday lunch. A Shabbat car will doubtless prove beneficial to those currently unable to walk to synagogue, including the elderly, wheelchair-bound, and young children. Following yesterday's announcement, the NASDAQ jumped 0.3% with stakeholders and Jewish leaders hailing the new technology as revolutionary. Shabbat chauffeur spokesman Michal Muksa confirmed the first fleet of cars are already in production and will be available in white and blue. So,
Was that published on April the 1st?
you got it. April 1st. Okay. So we will begin the next class with discussing, again, I'm purposely distinguishing between autonomous and automated, but we'll get into that next time. And that whole issue, even during the week, and how it relates to being used on Shabbat. And that will be our key discussion. As we said, next week is meant to be devoted to ethics.